Now today's video is about those people who would like to capture themselves riding their bike, or someone who wants to capture the photography around whilst they're riding or whilst they're on the bike, or even when they're off the bike. They want to capture a picture of their bike, they want to put it on Instagram, or they want to film, they're in a group ride, they want to film themselves riding in the group ride or the people around them in the group ride. What sort of cameras are best for that, and what cameras should you use? So let's roll our intro and let's have a look at what camera is available and what is the best one for which application. Now there is a number of different type of cameras out there. Now we have the normal mirrorless or DLSR, get it right, Wayno. And the DLSR cameras are really a bit obsolete now. We've moved to mirrorless, where what they've done is they've got rid of the mirror in the camera. So all of the screens and everything are electronic, and they're a little bit more smaller and compact. So it makes them kind of usable when you're riding the bike, but they're still a little bit awkward to use because they're still bigger than a GoPro, and they still need to have a reasonably big lens on them. And of course, you need to hold it and you need to put it in your pocket. If you're riding, something to put it in your back pocket, something like that. So those, although can be used, and there is some YouTubers who do use them, people like Lawrence Carpenter and Francis Cade have used those in the past, because the picture quality is really good, and the cameras now have in-body stabilization, which is called IBIS, and you can get reasonable footage just holding your camera out in front of you like this and pointing it at yourself, and you can get some pretty good footage. But of course, it's not convenient. You haven't got your hands on the handlebar. So if you was racing or you was pacing, taking a group ride, you may not want to take something like that. So there's other cameras that you can use. Now the other cameras available, which there's two of, there's the action type cameras, and that's like your Osmos and your GoPro, and there's a couple of knockoffs around that you can get at China that are quite cheap. Now, I do think that I haven't used the Osmos, the DG Osmos and the other brands, but I've used the GoPro, and I've got a GoPro Hero 9, and that camera is really quite useful for its application as an action camera, because you can put on a selfie stick, or you can mount it onto a GoPro mount on your bike, which just fits underneath your computer mount. I've got one on my bike, and you can fit it on there and you can point it out towards the people in front of you, and you can get footages of riding along of what you would see. So it's like point of view of what you're seeing, or you can mount it to your strap or to your helmet. And the GoPros are pretty tough, they're pretty strong, but they do have some downfalls, and that's the same with all the action cameras. And the downfalls is that the battery life is not that long. Maybe you get 30 minutes, 40 minutes out of them. And also they do suffer from overheating because their size is pretty small, and they're trying to get the maximum quality and stabilization out of that camera, and that generates a lot of heat. So they are limited. If you wanted to record a whole ride, like a 40-kilometer-hour ride, your GoPro's not going to last. It's just, or it'll overheat and stop, and you might have to restart it. So that's where the GoPros are limited. They are good for small bursts. Action cameras in whole are very, very good for small bursts. So if you want to put it on, take a bit of the footage, then turn it off, then turn it on a bit later, that's really good. And a number of these cameras can also be started by voice activation. So you can say, GoPro start recording, it'll start. GoPro stop recording, it'll stop. And also I do believe the other brands like the GG Osmos, the Insta 360 cameras also have voice activation. In fact, I do know that Insta does have voice activation. Now, the thing with GoPros and action cameras, you have a wide point of view. This is like a wide point of view, so you get a really wide viewpoint, so you get more in the picture. But the problem with wide lenses, as you can see here, I look further away, even though the camera is in exactly the same position as the previous lens I had on. And the previous lens I had on is what you'd call probably a medium type view, or pretty consistent type view. But with the wide angle view, there's a number of things you get. You get distortion at the outer edges. You can see my hands are getting bigger, and you get like this smaller type look in the center. And with normal type sizes lens, then everything stays fairly straight on the edges, fairly consistent, and you stay fairly consistent. Now, here we have a zoomed in lens. So this is a lot closer, and this is considered to be what our eyes see. And you can see that I'm a lot closer. And this lens length is considered to be what we would normally see with our own eyes, our own perception of distance. So this is kind of the closest to real world. Now, you don't get this with action cameras. Action cameras always look further away. And this is what you need to consider when you're using action cameras, because the footage, when you take it home and download it from the camera, is going to be a lot more wide angled. So what's the difference between a 360 camera and the GoPro camera? And I actually have another 360 camera here, which is something that I want why I made this video, because there's a new product on the market, which is a 360 1-inch sensor. So it has a bigger sensor, which gives you better tonality. You've got slightly more resolution. So a camera like this will give you a better picture. But is a camera like this suitable for cycling? And this is what I want to discuss today. Because I've got two. I've got a GoPro Max 360 and I've got the new Insta 1-inch 360. Now these two cameras could be used on your bike. Now, let me just take the cover off so you can see it. That's what it looks like. It has a much bigger lens compared to the GoPro, if you can see those there. So now you can see the two different types of 360 cameras. Now, the issue with the 360 cameras is, as I said before, they're like a wide angle lens. So what happens is everything looks further away. But that's the negative of the 360 cameras, but the advantage of the 360 cameras is they capture everything. So you can mount that camera, you can mount this camera like this on your bike, and you can capture everything around you. You can capture you can capture what's in front of you in one shot. And what you can actually do is you can reformat those pictures, and from one camera, you can get two different, or a multitude of different views from the camera. Now with 360 cameras, you can also use what they call an invisible selfie stick. Now this one here is an Insta 360 selfie stick, and this one's not very long. This is only like 1/2 meter long. And this is another one by Manfrotto, but you can buy a longer one by Insta 360. GoPro also make them. This one extends out, and you can get about 2.5 meters if you join these together. And what happens is because the 360 camera has a stitch line between the two cameras on each side, there's a stitch line there, that can hide your selfie stick. So it looks like that a drone's flying in front of you, or you can hold it out behind you and it looks like a drone's flying behind you, so you can get all these type of shots. And what I'll do is, I just made a video the other day when I was riding home, and I'll play that right now so you can see what type of footage you can get with these sorts of cameras. Now, the disadvantage, or the biggest problem with the older 360 cameras like the GoPro Max and the Insta 360 X2 and X3 is that the sensors are very small. So if it's overcast or you want to take pictures inside a room, they really suffer because the sensors are so small, and what you're doing is you're looking around the sensor and you're cropping into a tiny piece of that sensor, so the resolution suffers, and also so does the light, because that's only a very small part of the sensor. And that's where this new Insta 360 one comes in here, this one. And it's got a bigger sensor, and as you can see, it's much more bulbous and bigger. And this camera claims that it works a lot better. Now the problem with using this, and I've only had this like about a week, is that it is quite a bit heavy. It's about twice the weight. So when you put it on your bike, you need a stronger mount. or when you put it on your pole, obviously it's going to be a little bit heavier, which is not so much of an issue. But when you mount it on something like your helmet or your wrist or on your bike, because you want to capture the footage whilst you're riding, it's probably a little bit heavy, and it's very top heavy in weight. So even though this camera promises better footage for a cycling application, it's not really that good an option. But you still could do it. You still could mount this maybe on the front of your bike. It does feel a little bit heavy. I don't think you could mount it on your helmet. It's a little bit too heavy for that, but you probably could get it onto your bike and get better footage, and it will give you the same sort of view as this one. And the Insta 360 app also gives you some other features, which I'll show right here. And I'll put this as an intro in one of my other videos, and you get special effects where you can put blurring onto it, whilst the GoPro app doesn't have that same blurring, but the GoPro has some other features that the Insta 360 doesn't have. So there's pros and cons to the apps of both of these cameras. Let's go right back to the beginning of the video where we asked what is the best camera for cycling, and it depends what your application is. The first of all, if you're using a camera to record if there's a vehicle that gives you a close pass or hits you in some way, which is a safety feature, or I wouldn't say a safety feature, it's a legality feature, because then if something happens, you have evidence to show for the insurance company or the police what actually happened. And the best type of cameras for that are the Fly 6, and Garmin have now got one out that films out. Those sorts of cameras are pretty good, but they do have problems. I've heard they have problems, and they switch off, and also the Garmin one doesn't have very good stabilization. Now the problem with that is when you're trying to measure, or not measure, but read a number plate, that can be problematic. Now, if you want to film yourself riding, or you're in a group ride and you want to be able to capture all the people in the group ride and what you're riding, then the 360 action cameras are really excellent. This one here is pretty light, easy to mount on your bike. You can even mount it on your wrist. There's a little GoPro strap you can put on your wrist, and that gives you a different perspective. I've even mounted this underneath, down the down tube, and you can film your pedal action. So you can do all sorts of clever stuff with these 360 cameras, or you can put it on a selfie stick, hold it out in front. And Lawrence Carpenter loves using these 360 cameras with a selfie stick, and that gives a really nice perspective as well. So you can hold it behind you like this, so it looks like a drone's following, or you can hold it out in front and it looks like a drone's looking back at you flying along, and you can get some really nice footage. So it really depends what you want to do. And then if you just want to get something where you want to be able to change the wide angle view to some degree, the GoPros are really good. Now this is the GoPro 9, they've got a new one out, the GoPro 11, which has got a bigger sensor, so you're going to get a bit better quality, especially if you're riding in low light, like early in the morning or in the evening. The new GoPro is going to give you a better picture than this one here, which is the GoPro 9. But GoPros have got very good stabilization, and also you can select the view. You can have what they call linear, and you can have wide, so you can change the perspective of what your viewpoint is, and you can start these cameras, and this one here, the Insta, you can start them with voice commands. So it's pretty easy to start and stop them. You don't have to take your hands off the handlebars. So safety-wise, these cameras are great for catching footage, and also they have that safety feature of being able to initiate them by voice control. So guys, I hope that covers all of the cameras which you can use for cycling, because it's one of those things that I am obviously making videos, so I've got all this gear, but if you're just a casual user and you just want to capture a bit of stuff you want to put on Instagram, or you just want to capture it to share between your cycling group, then these sorts of action cameras or 360 cameras are really great for that. If you was taking a picture of your bike, then you would probably use something like this sort of camera here, because the quality is much better. You can get a much better photo with them. And here's an example of a photo that I took using a full frame camera. You can do some editing with it, you can play around the photos, and you can get much higher quality image. But for people just to share the stuff you did, you went on a ride, then the action cameras are really the way to go. And I would recommend this one here, the GoPro Max. Now the reason why I would recommend this, even though this one doesn't get a lot of media coverage on Instagram and YouTube and so forth, the reason why I recommend this one is because not only does this give you the 360 feature that the Insta 360 cameras, which is the most popular and advertised cameras, But this GoPro Max, the sound out with the camera is really good when you're riding along the bike. It has an excellent wind reduction on it, and you can ride along up to about 30 kilometers an hour. Obviously, once you start to go faster, the wind gets worse. And you can talk, and the audible is still quite reasonable and usable. So you could be riding along and you could have a conversation with someone. This camera will capture it, or you can just explain what's happening in the photo. So, hey, we're riding past, the old mill. This is the Fremantle Bridge. This is the Narrows Bridge. We're just going down past the river, and we're going to cross the river now. And this camera here, the sound is very good. Whilst with this one here, even though it's a better camera, the sound is a much subpar quality, and also compared to the other Insta360 cameras. So the GoPro Max, I would recommend, and I've made videos about this before, I would recommend this for capturing group rides or riding by yourself. This camera here, I believe, is still the best camera for that. And if you want to capture the legality stuff, go for the Fly 6 and also the Garmin. I think the Fly 6 is probably the best for that, even though the Garmin has the radar built in. And of course, if you're wanting to take just a picture of your bike leaned up in the cafe, these sorts of cameras are the best. So, but this one here, these obviously are a lot bigger to carry. Well, that's it, guys, for about cameras and cycling. And I will see you next